5 things deep thinkers quietly accept about being alone and why it makes them untouchable. 6:14 in the morning. Walter walks into his woodshop. 52. A golden retriever named Buddy follows him in. Margaret, his wife of 25 years, has left a thermos on the bench. Walter picks up a chisel. By the time the first apprentice arrives at 7, he has answered 3 private questions and forgiven a man he hasn't spoken to in 11 years. Without one conversation, that, more than anything else, is what makes a deep thinker at 52 untouchable. Most men over 45 who live like Walter get a label: antisocial, cold, detached, failing at the basic work of being a man. The label is wrong. Walter is not broken. He has not failed. He has quietly accepted 5 things about being alone that the world is still arguing about. Today, I want to walk you through what those 5 things are and why they make a deep thinker at 52 untouchable. First thing Walter quietly accepted: loneliness and being alone are not the same thing. They are not even close. In 1963, the theologian Paul Tillich wrote that language has 2 words for being alone because they describe 2 different states. One names what hurts about being on your own. The other names what's quietly valuable about it. Tillich's point was that if we keep confusing them, we misunderstand our entire inner life. Walter wouldn't read that line until he was 41. He read it on a Tuesday in the public library, while Margaret was at her sister's. He folded the page into his wallet. He still carries it. The neuroscience that backed up what Tillich saw came 40 years later. John Cacioppo at the University of Chicago spent 3 decades studying loneliness. His finding: loneliness is perceived social isolation, not a count of bodies in the room. It is the brain's reading of whether the connection it has is real. That is why a man can sit at a dinner party of 20 and feel emptier than he does in a quiet kitchen at 6 in the morning. The room doesn't decide. The quality of connection does. So here is the first tool, and you can use it tonight. Anytime you feel the ache, ask yourself one question: am I lonely, or am I just alone? If it's the second, your body needs nothing. If it's the first, the connection quality somewhere in your life is the real question. Walter learned to ask that question by 45. Most men his age never do. Second thing Walter quietly accepted: solitude isn't failure. It's the condition for everything that matters. In 1988, a British psychiatrist named Anthony Storr wrote a book called Solitude, A Return to the Self. The book quietly challenged a sacred idea that intimate relationships are the only source of human happiness. Storr argued that solitude ranks alongside relationships in shaping a life, not below them. Alongside. His case was simple. The people who built things that outlasted them, Beethoven, Kant, Newton, Beatrix Potter, built those things in solitude. Not despite it. In it, the deep work of a life is done in the rooms where no one is looking. Walter's woodshop is not a hiding place. It is the only room in his life quiet enough for the real work to begin. Storr would have called it the architecture of a generative man at 52. The world will call it antisocial. So here is the second tool, and it costs you nothing but discipline. 4 hours of solitude every week. No people, no screens, no input. Walter calls his shop hours. Call yours whatever you want. Just make them non-negotiable. The world is going to keep telling you to socialize more, get out more, see more people. Storr would have laughed. The architecture of a meaningful life is built quietly, by yourself, in rooms the world doesn't see. Third thing Walter quietly accepted: the distance he feels from his peers isn't a failure to grow, it is growth. In 1933, Carl Jung wrote something he never softened. Among nearly every patient he saw in the second half of life over 35, Jung said the deepest problem was always one of meaning, of finding what he called a religious outlook on life. He didn't mean a particular church or scripture. He meant a way of seeing that makes a life feel ordered from the inside out. Jung called the work of that second-half individuation the slow withdrawal from collective conformity and the return to the authentic self. By 45, you don't have the time or the appetite for office gossip, family drama, online debates. That isn't aging. That isn't bitterness. Jung would call it the natural withdrawal of a man whose psyche is finally doing the work it should have started 20 years ago. Other men feel this. The quiet ones at the back of weddings. The mechanic who sips his coffee while everyone at the table argues. The 78-year-old who wrote, somewhere in the comments of another video, "I am a true introvert. I do not need friends." He isn't bragging. He is just done with the noise. Walter knows this. He stopped trying to fit in at 45. By 52, he stopped explaining why. That is not isolation. That is the second half of a life finally allowed to begin. Here is what people miss about Walter. He walks into the kitchen after the shop. Margaret is at the table with a book. They don't talk for the first 10 minutes. Most men would call that distance. Walter calls it the deepest comfort he has with anyone. That is not loneliness inside a marriage. That is two people who finally stopped performing for each other. Now, if you've stayed with me this far, you've noticed something. The first three things Walter has accepted are about reframing. They are philosophical. Solitude, distance, the quiet kitchen, these are reframes. The next two are different. They have numbers behind them. They have peer-reviewed studies behind them. And the first one might land sideways because it touches something most men over 50 have wondered but never asked out loud. When Walter walks out of the workshop and into the house, the dog comes first. Not because the dog matters more than his wife. Not because their marriage is failing. But because of something a researcher at SUNY Buffalo discovered in 2002, a finding the rest of us are still a little afraid to say out loud. Before I tell you what she found, I want to say something quickly. If you've stayed with me for 7 minutes, you're the kind of man I make these for. Not the man looking for a 5-minute fix. The kind who's read enough psychology to recognize the deeper question. Subscribe, there's a new one every week. Now let me tell you what Karen Allen found. Fourth thing Walter quietly accepted. 2 close ties and a dog is enough. The science backs him up, but you have to read the fine print. In 2002, Karen Allen, along with James Blaskovich and Wendy Berry Mendez at SUNY Buffalo, published a study in psychosomatic medicine. 240 married couples, half-owned pets. Researchers asked participants to do a stressful task, mental arithmetic, under pressure with different companions in the room. They measured blood pressure throughout. Here is what they found. When the spouse was present during the task, blood hard up from 120/80 up to 155/100. When the pet was present, same task, same stress, blood pressure rose only to 125/83. Read that again. The husband or wife of 25 years made the heart pound harder than the Labrador. Now I am not telling you to leave your wife for a golden retriever. But here's the test. Have you ever felt calmer doing your taxes with the dog at your feet than with anyone else in the room? If so, Karen Allen has been waiting for you since 2002. She did the math. The dog wins. I have a friend named Henry, 58, retired engineer, divorced 6 years, lives alone with a cat named Stillman. Henry says, I have my brother who calls every other Sunday and a cat. Statistically, that puts me above 3/4 of American men my age. He smiles when he says it. And he's right. A separate study by sociologists at 3 universities looked into this. Americans in 1985 had 3 close confidants on average. By the mid-2000s, the most common answer had dropped to 0. 1 in 4 Americans reported having nobody, not one person they could talk to about anything that mattered. Henry, with his brother and a cat, sits above 75% of American men his age. Walter, with Margaret and Buddy, sits well above that. 2 close ties and a pet is not poverty. It is wealth the world hasn't told you about yet. So here is the third tool. Audit your inner circle. Not Instagram followers. Not LinkedIn. The actual number of people who would drop everything if you called at 3 in the morning. If you have 2 and a pet, you are not lonely. You are statistically rich. Fifth thing Walter has quietly accepted, and this is the one no man over 50 lets himself believe, is that the ache you sometimes feel about being distant isn't a character flaw. It is physiology. In 2003, Naomi Eisenberger and her team at UCLA published a study in Science magazine that should have changed how we talk about loneliness. Using brain scans, they found that the brain processes social rejection in the same neural region as physical pain, a small area called the anterior cingulate cortex. When someone says, "Why are you so quiet?" your brain doesn't process that as an opinion. It processes it as an injury. Same circuit, same response. That ache you feel sometimes, the one you don't tell anyone about, has been an injury all along. It just wasn't visible. Notice your chest right now. Notice your jaw. If something just tightened, even slightly, the ache has been with you longer than you have admitted. So try this. Take 1 breath. Make the exhale longer than the inhale, then another. That isn't a meditation trick. That is parasympathetic activation. You can give your body the all-clear signal even when the world hasn't given it to you. Walter does this without naming it. Now you can name it. Mental health note. Nothing in this video is a clinical diagnosis. If you have been carrying social pain for years that doesn't lift, please speak to a licensed therapist. Other men have felt this ache. The 78-year-old in the comments of another video. Henry on his porch with Stillman. Walter at 4 in the morning when Margaret is asleep. The ache existed once. They just stopped letting it run them. So let me say something out loud that almost nobody will say at this length. A man with 2 close ties and a dog is statistically richer than 3/4 of American men his age. That isn't deprivation. That is discipline. The world calls it loneliness because the world hasn't earned the right to call it anything else. Walter knows this. Henry knows this. The 78-year-old in the comments knows it. And now if you have sat with me for almost 12 minutes, you know it too. The world will keep trying to convince you that your circles should be bigger, your weekends more crowded, your inbox fuller. The world is wrong. A small circle is not failure. A small circle is the price of a real circle. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something or hasn't lived long enough yet to know better. 5 things. Before you go, loneliness isn't being alone. They are different states, and the brain processes them differently. Solitude is the condition for everything that matters, not the price of failure. Distance at 45 is the architecture of a maturing mind, not a defect. 2 ties and a dog puts you above 3/4 of the country, not below. And the ache, when it comes, is body, not character. 3 tools you can use this week. 1. The distinguishing question. Am I lonely or am I just alone? 2. The shop hours. 4 protected hours of solitude every week, non-negotiable. 3. The inner circle audit. Count the 3 a.m. calls, not the social media followers. Pick one. Try it for 7 days. Notice what shifts. If any of these 5 hit you somewhere real, don't just nod and move on. In the comments, type the number 1 through 5 that landed hardest. I read every single one. Honestly, that is where I learn the most. And the men in the comments who land on the same number are how a lot of us figure out we are not alone in this. If this made one 52-year-old man feel less alone tonight, that is all I wanted. Walter, Henry, the 78-year-old in the comments, and you, watching this with whatever has been pulling at you for the last 14 minutes, we are not all in the same place. But tonight, we are at the same table, and there is nobody we have to explain ourselves to.